Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be um, here on Facebook Live. I'm going to wait a few minutes and let some folks come in. I'm also going to add another Audacity thing here before we start to record. So I know I'm coming in late, but I do what I do. Okay, I do what I do. Let me just go ahead and first of all stop all of this, and I want to start something new. So, just letting people come on in. Come on in, you guys. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Black girl from Eugene. How are you? How are you? How are you? Okay. And I'm going to. I don't want to save this project. I kind of want to close that project. Um, how's everybody? Hey, how are you? What's going on? I'm just waiting for some folks to jump on. I know I usually come on at 11. It's 11:30. Before I get started, I'm trying to set things up and just get it going. It's been such a long time since I've seen you. I hope you're doing well. All right, we're gonna get started. And let me see how this works. Hopefully, this works easily. We'll just put this right here, and we're gonna get started right here. Welcome today. This is Sunday, and I believe it is June. What day is it? Like June 5th or 6th? And this is Aisha Elliott, and this is Black Girl from Eugene. And I also want to say we are simulcasting on 97.3 KEPW local radio station. So, hello, everybody who is watching us and listening to us. I appreciate your weekly attendance to my show and letting me know how you are enjoying it. That really makes a huge difference to how things go down. So, hi. Everyone who's on my Facebook Live, please say hello. Let's get to talking. Hey, Daddy O. So, yeah, this is a little different today because I'm going to keep it short and I'm going to keep it sweet. But before I get started, I want to give an announcement that my nonprofit, formerly known as Black Gold Culture Camp, is now known as Kids for the Culture, and it is Black centered, Black led education, and we are doing summer activities for any child between the in middle school age and early high school, which means kids that are going into sixth grade and kids that are going into ninth grade, and even ninth graders who may be going to 10th grade that want to help out. We are doing summer activities at a 100% scholarship and sliding scale otherwise. There's actually no criteria, like just ask, tell us what you need. And then in the fall, we're going to be doing, we're going to be working in the schools, having conversations around race and efficacy and self empowerment and self identity. So it's going to be super amazing. And I invite everyone who knows anybody who might want to be involved. Kids for the Culture is also looking for middle school folks who want to learn about leadership skills and be a part of our committees. And we have a programming committee where the middle schoolers are actually going to be helping program what Kids for the Culture will be doing throughout the year. And so we are building that committee. So if you know someone who's extra excellent and wants to be a part of the leadership, we are filling all the roles for the committee, meaning president, co-chair, secretary, and we're going to be teaching all those roles so they will have this skill set moving into high school. Um, and this is again for all children. Obviously, BIPOC kids will be prioritized, but this is not just BIPOC kids. Although the curriculum and the conversation will be BIPOC centered. All right, that's that. And if anyone does want a hoodie, I still have them. And I actually ordered some bigger sizes. I've got some 1Xs, I've got some 2Xs, I've got one 3X. So if y'all want a hoodie, Black Girl from Eugene hoodie, we've got them. We even have some t-shirts left. You just have to DM me and I will hook you up. All right, so let's get started. All right, y'all, look. Y'all know I do race education and lecturing. I lecture at different businesses and county entities and universities, and I do all of this, and I lecture about um, race and equity, and really I'm talking to white folks about understanding white supremacist culture. So I it's not a little bit that I've actually ran into this idea of walking into a space where someone has hired wants to hire me. Someone is like super like, yeah, let's do this, or not necessarily just me, colleagues of mine that are doing this work, and they would say, yes, we want to change, we want our policies to be reflective of an inclusive language, we want our practices to be reflective of an inclusive um, uh, practices, we want more people of color to be working in our buildings, in our agencies and in our programs, but yet we can't get people to come and we can't get people to stay. So that's like the common request, right? And so the number one thing I do, and I'm not speaking for all equity advisors, but number one thing I do is I want to know what your actual personal investment is into the work. So they ask, well, what's going to be what are you going to do? What are you going to do in terms of like what does the classes look like? What does the series look like? So then you start telling them what the series looks like. And so at that point, right, what they say and what they do is that they say, oh, well, we definitely want to have you talk to us about this, but we don't really want you to like talk to us about this. We want you to, we, first of all, we're going to tell you how we can accept your information. We're going to tell you how we need you to speak to us about this information. We're going to tell you what, if you want to talk about those things that you believe will help us on the journey to anti-racism culture, I need you to use this particular language, and I need you to do it this way. So this is the thing I have now. Now, I'm sorry. At what point was does the line of white fragility get to this point of like I, of just this disrespect of integrity of the work? Like I understand. I mean, this is a two-tiered thing for me, and you guys know how I am. I'm just going to talk to you how it's coming to me. So, like the two-tier thing is this. I know that there are people who do this work who shouldn't be doing this work. I've seen it myself. I've been in the audience of like, that was cringy in terms of how they are trying to connect the information. I've heard from other people of providers and equity workers having white people stand up and like say things that can feel derogatory, that can feel punitive, that have like a kind of punitive sense to it, which obviously is not the way people are going to learn information. It's just kind of like a control switch aroo going on there, which I don't think is cool. So there's that. I get that. But at what point are you white folks going to realize that a professional, to how to recognize a professional? And I do think that there's, when you talk about when you're talking about racism and you are listening to a black woman talk and what you hear is aggressiveness, and you hear a point of directness that you're just not comfortable with, you're really re-articulating your racism and your fragility, and not actually seeing the fact that you are talking to a man or woman or person that is actually knowledgeable about what the subject matter is. And when you're knowledgeable about something, there's very few things in between that you have to negotiate, right? Like you definitely are open to learn at all times, but when you're hiring a professional, let a professional be a professional. But because this is a black person who you're hiring, all of a sudden there's these extra steps that you have to take in order to find that that person is credible. And hey, you're spending your money, I'm all for it. But I'm just saying keep the same energy for everyone that you're hiring, right? Like, it's kind of that idea of like, once you understand that this work is going to ask you to step out of your own comfort zone, you're like, oh, but wait, is that legit? Like, is that something I should be doing? Is that what I don't know, I'm uncomfortable now, so I kind of want to go somewhere else. That's okay. That's your choice, but you need to understand what you're choosing. What you're choosing is not to confront your discomfort with your own racism. You're choosing not to confront your discomfort with change and progress. You're choosing to confront, to choose not to confront your stereotypical ideas of what leadership looks like coming from a person of color. That's all what it's happening. If you have a way of hiring someone, or you have a way of talking to somebody about race, and you're uncomfortable, that is on you. If someone is demeaning you, now there's a difference between being uncomfortable and being vulnerable, right? Like the uncomfortability is vulnerable. I mean, that you got to be able to step into that. And so if you're not willing to have a conversation with and allowing someone to do their job, which is like lead you through conversations that may not feel like empowering to you. um, I'm not saying that the conversation can't be empowering. What I'm saying is that when you hire a black person and then you want to critique how a black person shows up, I need you to position yourself a little differently. Once you've hired someone, that is a professional contract. So what I'm saying, when there's something that's unprofessional happening, by all means do what you got to do. But because you don't like what you're hearing, that is not an indication of something that's unprofessional. That's not that indication. Like I've had people come to me and be like, "This is what has happened to me," and because they've given me the money, I almost have to do exactly what they're asking me to do. But what they're asking me to do is curtail and kind of compromise the lesson plan so that they can be comfortable with the material. White folks, that's not how it works. Racism is not going to be something that you are going to be like, yay, let's talk about racism. That's not how it's going to be. You are going to be uncomfortable because racism is uncomfortable, right? I mean, it's uncomfortable for everyone. So for you to tell the person that you have hired, look, you can talk about these things, but you can't talk about that thing because we're not ready. Let them decide what the curriculum should be because they might get you ready. You may be surprised at the efficacy that you have to actually get to the point where that you can talk about racism. You might actually get there if you allow a black person who is an educator educate you in the way that they find most uh, uh, effective, and you can just get over the idea that you're uncomfortable with words like white supremacy. You don't, as soon as you hear white supremacy and you go, oh, I don't want black people to punish me. Like I don't want to hear that they think I'm a white supremacist. I don't want, first of all, how about you understand that you don't know? This is something that you don't understand. That's what the difference between a race equity, any kind gender, any kind of educator has information for you that you don't know. We can actually unpack these trigger words, and I'm air quoting those for who are on my podcast listening. Trigger words that are causing people to be feel insecure because it might touch something that's very real for them, right? So as I'm going through this, and as I'm listening to colleagues come to me and talk to me about the abuse that they are taking from their white clients, and from CEOs and directors and nonprofit, executive directors who are abusive, because what they're doing is saying, hey, look, black person, come in here and give us what we want, but let me tell you what, you're not going to do what you think you're going to do. What you're going to do is what we can handle and what we're going to put up with. All right, first of all, you're going to do what we can put up with, and if you make us uncomfortable at all at any point, I'm cutting this contract out. Now, uncomfortable, right, is a part of this work. Facing definitions that might sound like your life experience is part of this work. That's the whole point, is that you're actually looking at things that we have believed to be true in the past that have falsehood around it, that's clouding behavior so that you can, it's like, so that you can see forward into progress, so that you can actually try to close the cognitive dissonance, so that you can unpack it, so that you can go forward in a informed manner, so that you can have context to your privilege, so that you can understand you have privilege. None of that's a comfortable conversation, right? But for people to just decide that they want to say that they are working on inclusive measures, that they are creating inclusive measures, but don't want to do those inclusive measures within themselves, that's bullshit. It's performative action, and it's not okay. So if you are somebody of privilege who is wanting to do this work, but you're like, I'm doing this work at work, then you are part of the problem. Because you have got to understand that the work that you do at work has no intent, has no impact at all to the people that you're actually trying to serve when you don't believe in it yourself, right? So stop bullshitting everybody. Just don't do it. Say I'm much more comfortable in my privilege, with my racism, with my comfortable diet racism, because and this is something that I've always said to people, that it's like, look, racism is on a spectrum. Racism is on a spectrum. You're a racist if you believe that you have the right to continue with how you've been operating since 1985, since 1995, and ain't nothing wrong with it. Although you've heard all the complaints of all the Native folks, you've heard all the complaints of all the black people, but you just feel like, they just need to get their shit together and we could all work together. That's actually, when you have the opportunity to know better and do better, that's you're choosing your privilege, which in the context of the United States is racist, right? So in the context of cultural privilege and ethnic privilege and institutional privilege and all of the things that go along with whiteness, you're choosing racism. So look, you don't have to be QAnon. You don't have to be Trump. You don't have to be the Tea Party. You don't have to be, any of those people, KKK, to be racist and perpetuate white supremacy. You don't have to do that. And I'm not saying that you have to go 100% being into like, oh yay, everyone can do whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even convincing people to do that. I don't care about how far you go. But what I do care about is that you understand that what you're not doing is embracing inclusivity while you're throwing up a Black Lives Matter sign. That is what I'm saying. If you're not going to do the work on a personal level and understand how you actually relate to racism, how you feel about black people when no black people are around, that's where your connection to racism is. Not how many policies that you have tried to overlook and see, and you're not willing to decenter yourself. If someone says white supremacy to you and you go, oh, wait, no reason to be using that kind of language, that is the problem for you, right? And if you're willing to like curve your involvement in progress, because words like white fragility and words like white supremacy and words like saviorism might are triggering for you, and you feel attacked, and I'm air quoting again, attacked. Yeah, you're not ready to face your own racism. That's the truth. You're not ready. You're comfortable in your privilege and you're comfortable in your racism. That's okay as long as you understand that. Don't come acting like you're inclusive and trying to create inclusive spaces if you're not an inclusive space. This is not, you can't, this is what you're going to do is create a toxic space. If you have, if you don't understand what your relationship is to black people with no black people around, you're like, well, I grew up in Oregon, I grew up in Eugene, I grew up in Wisconsin, and there has never been black people around. I've never had them around. I've never experienced, relationships. Does that mean that that you have the right to stay ignorant about your privilege? I'm sorry, Eugene is not a microcosm. I mean, Eugene is not in a vacuum. It's a part of a whole global world that exists with other humans in it, right? So when one person of color, black, white, black, brown, indigenous, however you want to categorize people of color, walk through that space, and you have not done internal conversations about how you would respond, or at least how you actually feel about that, you are creating a toxic space for that person to deal with. And then their reaction to that space is something that you think that you have the right to judge. This is the problem. So if we really want to get on the same page of moving forward and recognizing each other in a human, with humanity, like I say almost every freaking show, white privilege and white nationalism and inequity of race and culture is a white problem. So that means that besides just reading the books and knowing the language, you actually have to look inside yourself and be like, what do I think? Why don't I, have black owned anything in my house? Like, why do I feel like when I go to a black neighborhood, I'm like going on an adventure, or I feel like I'm like going out of my, I feel so out of my comfort zone. And that's fine to begin with if you're trying, but like that's just like an adventure to go into somebody else's space and see how it happens. You got to understand what othering looks like. Even when you think that you're a really cool person, you're like super progressive in this idea, and you're still othering the experience of somebody else. It's confusing when people are actually trying to learn this work and they're doing this work, and it's confusing for white folks to actually be able to uh, switch that narrative when they are not decentered in their own belief system about white supremacy. If you can't decenter yourself, meaning that every narrative that you have puts you in the middle of it, if you can't take yourself out of the middle of it and actually hear other people's experience in their power, as if they have a decision making, that they have power to make their own decisions, and that they have efficacy, which is like, the power to say this is right and or this is wrong, and we can the community can acquiesce to that change. If you don't see that as viable or valuable, you know that's a relationship to racism. That if you're questioning whether or not you've hired a black woman, and that black woman wants to talk to you about something you find to be very uncomfortable, and you're going, you know what, I don't think that I'm comfortable with black talking about this with black people or you or anyone, if you're going to be using that language. That language is a part of the curriculum, sis. I'm sorry. That I mean, that's like me talking to like my science teacher being like, oh, I don't, you know what? I don't know about talking about cellular levels when you're using, male and female and blah, blah, blah. Could you just like not name that and do something different so that I can learn that material? Because I'm uncomfortable with the cellular language. I'm uncomfortable with it. You don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. What you get to do is learn the language. And if you can't handle the language, that's okay. Don't do it. If you can't handle the language, just the language, like there's nothing else that's happened. It's just language. Like we've just said the word, right? And language, yes, don't get me wrong, language is extremely powerful. But we're talking vocabulary, we're talking about definitions, right? So if you are afraid to being defined into whiteness, and that is your stumbling block because you don't want to be defined under whiteness when you live a privileged white life, you're right. We can't go any further because you got to start right there, right? That's where you need to start, because that in itself is why you cannot move forward and why your spaces are not inclusive, because you don't get it on your own internal self. You have a relationship to racism. Everyone does. Black people have a relationship to white supremacist culture. We do. We are deconstructing white supremacist culture for those who are privy to it, are trying to deconstruct it in the same fashion that white people are. It's just a different story. We got different things to work out, right? We got different realizations to come to. White supremacist culture is what needs to be deconstructed no matter what direction you're coming from. But if you can't handle hearing the words white supremacist culture, what are we doing? What can we possibly do? All I'm saying is, look, people are spending real good money to get these conversations happening. And I need people to understand that these conversations have to be on a personal level at some point. You're gonna have to take the moment that someone says something to you that might reflect your privilege. Because white supremacy has everything to do with your privilege. And if you can't handle talking directly about your privilege, you really can't handle an inclusive space. Because everything about that inclusive space is going to threaten what you don't even want to talk about. You don't even want to mention. So it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So sit down with yourself and be like, hey, can I really not? I mean, when I hear racism, I want to fight. I feel like you're trying to attack me. When I hear, white supremacists, I feel like you're trying to pin me with KKK members. And now I want to I need some clarification. I need you to make me feel better about this. I need you to tell me that's not what you think. I need you to tell me that I'm not that bad person. I need you to tell me, no, that's not how this works. You need to have this discussion within yourself to find out where in the spectrum of racism do you happily stay in, so that you can continue the cognitive dissonance of the harm that it is doing to that one black coworker that you have in your room. That's the truth. I'm sorry, not sorry. And I just I feel like we're having a lot of progress. I mean, as I say all of that, I do feel like there's more people who are willing to have these conversations. But when you hire someone, please do the background check, right? Meaning that have a reference so that you aren't harming them by your inappropriate, invasive, um, really, uh, I would say unprofessional and very privileged inquiries into your an overly scrutinizing into your educator's way of educating, especially after you've already hired them. What are you doing? You wouldn't do it to anybody else. That in itself should tell you where your relationship is to inclusivity. Can you actually handle someone who's different than you, just in the room going, I speak like this, it says the same thing? Can you handle that? I'm going to bet the answer is no. Performative anti-racism is very toxic, and it's very difficult for white people to understand that they are not helping the situation by just shutting up and letting it go. If you disagree with inclusivity, you need to say so we can then work forward to get to putting you in a position that works best for you and the company, right? If you're not into inclusivity, you're not into bringing indigenous people in, you're not trying to have a policy that creates more time being spent talking about other people's issues, cultural and ethnic inclusivity, and that's just not what you want to do. Hey, I'm here for it. But don't be in the way of people who are progressing, right? You should go to a place that actually creates those spaces, because remember, black people aren't here to convince you that racism is bad. I'm not here to convince you that you need to be a better person. That, my friends, is up to you. A better person means that you recognize humanity for me. Understanding the context of my reality as a black person living next door to white people would be, at the very least, a neighborly thing to do, to understand the context of how I walk through my day. When you're talking to me and I say, I have a headache, it's been a long day, I need to go inside, right? Or my son does not feel welcome here. We just need to have more representative teachers or representative counselors or whatever, and you can understand without talking in detail the context of that, without taking it personally. Like, that is when it comes to being, when we can respect each other's journeys and not have to be the center of them, right? So that part for me is when I'm talking to a person who understands humanity, who understands how to move forward in an inclusive manner, because it's not about who they are or what they are or how they feel it should be. It's about what makes the group move forward cohesively. So anyway, I guess I'm on one today, y'all. I just thought, like, it's come up so many times that I should say something. It's come up a couple times for me. It's come up for a few times for colleagues. It's come up enough that while working, not I don't work just in Eugene. Like, I have clients that are in Portland. I have clients that are in California. I have clients that are in Ohio. I have clients that are in Arizona. So it's not just Eugene, Oregon that I'm talking to, that I'm coming up against these CEOs and these directors who are unwilling to actually talk about their relationship to racism and how they're putting this policy into play when they don't really believe the policy under play. It's very much about the dollars over the people. And I think it's really important that we don't mess with that. We need to call it into accountability, the ability to have these difficult conversations, not to sit in the chair, take the note, and get the credit, right? Critical race theory is under attack at this very moment. Critical race theory is essential to putting context to the history and to the conversation that we have had about this country forever. It's one-sided, which we all know, and to have critical race theory challenge, and I'm air quoting challenge again, the ideals of what's going on into our system, into our school system, into the indoctrination of our children, into the mindsets that all of us as adults, I'm gonna say a lot of us as adults are trying to deconstruct in this moment. I think is extremely important to understand. If it wasn't something that would crack this whole can wide open, we wouldn't be having the response that we have for it right now. I mean, let's catch on to the patterns. Let's catch on to the patterns. The actual fact is that we would not have this response to critical race theory that we've always had, but especially now, if it wasn't something critical to the consciousness of the people, to the truth of the story, to the wholeness, right, of the narrative. Come on, y'all. Like, let's not fall for the okie doke. That's what I'm trying to say. The okie doke. Let's not fall for that. We can do better. We can do better. And there's people out here who are willing to show you the way. But don't get scared of words like white supremacy. Come on. Why are you scared? If you were nervous about that and you're like, oh, I think you're going to be punitive to me, did you do something? Oh, so you know. Oh, then we can have this conversation. Well, what is it that you did that you thought that when I said white supremacy that was talking about you, and that now we gotta talk? Now you're scared that I'm gonna have a feeling about you. What happened? What was it? So you do recognize your privilege, and you do recognize that you don't utilize it for my benefit, and you do recognize that you would just walk past someone who was being racially profiled, and not uh, or a video or whatever that you could possibly do. So you do recognize that, or not. I'm confused. Just kidding. I'm not confused at all. But I'm just saying, like, what is it about the word that's triggering you? And for the fact that you're saying that you're not racist, but yet just saying the word white supremacy is triggering you, huh? When someone is healed from their trauma, that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore. Just saying. Just saying. Once you have moved on from your trauma, racism is traumatic. Racism traumatizes people. White supremacy traumatizes even the people who are benefiting from it. It's not the truth, therefore, you are living a lie. That is never empowering. So, when you realize that that is the truth, that your whole existence of privilege and the way that you thought that you walked through the world was a way that benefited everyone around you, or that just the way that life was for everybody, and you realize that that is a lie and it's actually been causing actual harm. It actually causes the death of other people and has been ever since its inception, and you feel personally guilty but not willing to explore that cognitive dissonance. And then, do you understand? Do you see the rabbit hole that I'm going down with that? That is not black people's problem. That is something that you have to deal with, and that if, in order for you to get those words, those big words you're learning in all these wonderful books you're reading, that's the relationship you have to get past, right? You got to get past that part. And if you believe you're past that part, talk to some educators, talk to some black folks, explore where black and brown is in your life, right? Explore what feelings come up when black and brown is in your life. And if it's always, I just love black people, or I think black men are beautiful, that is a relationship to it as well. That's not necessarily healthy. I'm just challenging the concept of humanity that everybody in the Pacific Northwest wants to hold on to, but not have the context around the lived experience of each other, of each other's personal journey. Trauma is real. We are traumatized in this society, especially in 2021, from all of the things that we've all gone through collectively in 2020. We are all in a flux of transformation, which leaves us all very vulnerable, extremely so. Some of us are able to give aid to some of the pieces of vulnerability and some of the parts that are opening up and spreading out, because of this new transformation, because the door has cracked open. Some of us can lead in that space. Some of us don't need to be leading in that space, and just because because white folks go, hey, they're talking about you, go up there and do your dance, that doesn't mean they should be up there doing that dance, right? That's also a part of a trauma response of like, oh, okay, I can do it too, right? That's not. Stay in your lane, be honest with yourself, where you are in the process. Traumatized people shouldn't be teaching this work. People who are still in pain from racism shouldn't be teaching this work. People who cannot articulate themselves and how this work it functions cognitively, behaviorally, societally, and academically should not be part of this work. This work is complex. right? There's lots of things that happen in it. You have to be able to have a way to deal with what trauma is going to come for you and be able to separate that in a space where you can still provide healing. That's how that works. This race equity work should be trauma informed. White folks are traumatized. Black folks are traumatized. Indigenous people are traumatized. That's real. So if we're just talking at each other because we have something to say, get a podcast like this. That's what I do, right? I just like to talk about things that I have things to say. But I have actually in real time, and I just talk about it all the time. My relationship to racism has been on front and center, and absolutely transparent to my journey to get to the point where I can talk to white people who don't like me because I'm a black woman and still teach them about themselves and walk away from that conversation in a way that has empowered the process of learning, not necessarily empowered the people to be a better person. I'm not that. That's for them to do. It's the process of learning, it's the information, it's giving people what they can pick up or they can choose to pick up or not. My transformation from my trauma with racism has been evidential. And I am not saying that everybody's transformation into trauma has to be front and center and transparent. Not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that even in our space as BIPOC people, flipping the script real quick, and white folks, to be honest, like we have to realize how much we can take in with our trauma. If you were traumatized by black kids or indigenous kids as a child, and that's where your context of racism is coming from, be honest about that and step into that trauma. Have you have you written off all black and indigenous people because of the trauma that you've had when you were 10 years old and got picked on at that one time that you were the only white kid there? Legit. But is that where you're coming from? Deal with that. Deal with that before you try to pretend like you're inclusive. Pretend like you don't have a problem with indigenous and black people. It's important that your traumas are put in check before you try to do this work, right? Because even when you are in your steady 2 feet, there are things that will come to you that would be triggers if you were not healed in this process, and you could be able to take that trigger and go, oh, hello, I remember you. This is how we're going to work with that, right? That's what I'm saying. And so nobody's bulletproof in this work. Nobody is like unpunishable. There's always things that happen that get to people. But I'm just saying it's really, 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 really important. If you're going to engage in the work of anti-racism as a white person who is privileged, you need to be able to hear what the work entails. You don't get to dictate how it happens. You can dictate how far you can handle it. If something happens, if something happens and you're like, this is way uncomfortable for me, I can't deal, cool. That's where you step out. But remember, that is where you are. You did not go further than that. That does not mean you failed. That means that's where you are, and that's where you have to go back to continue. Understanding that you couldn't get past this space, and why not? That's where you start, right? But for you to say the black teacher or the black educator has to do something different so that you can get past that spot, no, 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 no. That work is for you to do. That's on you. Now, it's very well that the educator might be a good fit for you. Maybe they weren't very good at their job. Maybe that's true. Possibly. But I'm still going to say 8 times out of 10, even 9 times out of 10, if you took the time to hire someone, you checked their references. I don't know what your hiring practices are, but I'm assuming you didn't just pick up boo-boo off the corner because they were black. I certainly hope you didn't do that. I certainly hope you did ask for a reference. I mean, that's legitimate when you're hiring someone. Considering that you've done that, when they say something that you are uncomfortable with, Is it because it's racist and it's touching a racist button in your body because you have an intimate relationship with that piece? Or is it that the provider of the information is actually doing something wrong? I mean, I already know the answer. I'm just asking you guys to think about it. But I told y'all I was going to keep this short. I do have a meeting to go to for Kids for the Culture. And I hope that everyone has enjoyed my podcast thus far. I know my podcast is weekly, or you know my podcast is weekly. And I appreciate everyone who tunes in every week to listen to moi. I appreciate that. And if you could share the videos, that is also appreciated. And if we could get the conversation going about fragility and triggering words for white people and what that means to be triggered by vocabulary that has to do with racism, and what that actually means for your personal relationship to racism, I think is something that we should really, really explore. I also would like for you to explore what it means to be in a space where you feel that racism has to do with the involvement of black people. And so when there's no black and brown people around, marginalized communities are not to be seen, that racism really isn't a problem. If that is how you operate, I need you to sit with that, because I need you to actually sit with the idea that racism is not something that black and brown people are creating or perpetuating. It is a white privileged problem. Therefore, it exists within institutional structures, within white people who benefit from privilege, from white privilege, from that systemic creation of this problem. You don't recognize that. That means there doesn't have to be black and brown people around to deconstruct it. That's what I'm trying to get to. All right. Everyone who is here, thank you for watching me. Please share the video on as you can. I am moving on. I will be back next week. I have met an indigenous native person of Hawaii, and we are going to talk about what they feel and how they see colonization on the island. They will be either next week or the week after. I also have my son, Quentin Richardson, who will be on talking about manifestation. And I also have coming up a conversation around, um, oh shoot, what was it? Oh, I forgot. I forgot the title of it. Anyway, check it out. It's coming through in the next couple weeks. It's about to be very, very, very. I'm having a couple folks of my friends of mine of the LGBT community to talk about commercialization of Pride, and what this all means for them and how they are walking through the world right now in 2021. And they are both amazing people, and so they are going to be on my show. I'm hoping next week have the indigenous person the following week, Juneteenth, and then we would have my son at the end of the week. So just letting you know, at the end of the month, just letting you know that that is all coming to Black Girl from Eugene. So keep your eye out. Every week we will pop in 11-ish, heavy on the ish. And I will see you guys all then. All the comments here, I appreciate y'all. It would seem that most racist white folks are really concerned about what people of color, so-called, will do with their success. That's what um, Carlton Richardson, who is my dad, says, and they are very concerned because they don't understand the context in which they're even talking. They don't understand the context of the problem. They don't understand systemic how still they benefit from systemic racism or recognize what systemic racism is. And I think that is a much bigger conversation around the indoctrination of white supremacist culture. So yeah. Anyway, all right. I will talk to y'all soon. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a productive week. Take time to take care of yourself and others, and try to stay grounded as much as you can. Black Girl from Eugene, Aisha Elliott, and I'm out.